The CentreSteer Podcast, a Land Rover podcast by Land Rover owners. Welcome to the third edition of the CentreSteer Podcast. This month, we discuss off-roading basics, video recording on the trail, British wiring, and a cautionary tale about a series Frameover. The M word is about snake oil. But first, the news. So welcome to the third edition of the CentreSteer Podcast. I'm John Costage, your host. And dear listeners, I know there's at least a few of you out there. If you have comments or suggestions on our podcast, how things are going, any topics you'd like to hear about, I encourage you to go out to our website, CentreSteer.com. That's C-E-N-T-R-E, the British spelling. And there's a feedback page. Go ahead and give us some feedback on how things are going. You can also tweet us at CentreSteer. I follow the tweets pretty closely, and it's a good way to respond and get immediate feedback from me. So, as I said, I'm John. We have three people joining me today on the panel.
I'm Harold. I wrench on rovers for a living, and I own several.
And I'm Morgan. I own a 1982 Series 3, which I like tinkering on occasionally. And I'm actually about to do a Frameover on it.
And our final panelist who's joining us also via Skype is Mark.
Hi, I'm Mark. I've got a 01D2 that's a running work in progress.
As they all are.
Who the reason that he's not here is he's having a fuel pump problem. Is that right?
No, my steering pump is trying to die.
There you go. It's pretty smart. And just for the record, I own a couple rovers, I guess. One's actually functioning at the moment. That's a 2001 Disco 2. And hopefully my 109 will be back shortly.
109 is nominally functional at this point.
It has started up.
Just not quite roadworthy yet.
That's right. It did turn over. And in fact, if you go out to my personal website, I have video there of it turning over for the very first time in North America. So did you see that, Morgan?
I did. That was pretty impressive.
It was pretty cool.
It's always a spectacular belch the first time you fire one.
We filled the whole garage with smoke. That was pretty cool. Open the rear pod bay door, Hal.
Yeah, not the blackest I've seen it, but that was right up there.
It was fun. Anyway, so all right. First thing, we're going to slight new format change for the third edition. We're going to start with some news. So the first, and those will be short things we talk about, things I've seen in the past month. And if you feel like commenting, go ahead. And if you don't, well, then we'll just move on to the next one. So first thing is sales for Jaguar Land Rover in May, well, Land Rover in particular, U.S. sales increased 3% in May of 13, and that's an all-time U.S. year-to-date high for the brand. And the all-new Range Rover sales increased 33% for May of 13. I think it's fantastic. The reason that's fantastic, even though I'm not in the market for a brand new Land Rover at the moment, is that the fact that they're selling, that means that parts are still available and there's an interest and people are out there. The brand's there. It's not going to wither away like, say, Packard.
It strengthens the brand, which leads to further support for the legacy models.
Absolutely.
Now is that right? Did I hear correctly that the bulk of the sales increase was in the Range Rovers?
Let me quickly scan this. I believe that is the case.
Interesting.
Yes. I guess to read a little more, they were Land Rover sales were 3,500 units, 3% up from 3,400 units the previous year. Jaguar, okay. Yeah. So, here's a specific, yeah. I know, people don't want to hear me reading. It's very exciting.
It's a thrill a minute right here.
I believe it is. It may, in fact, be in the Evoque. The Range Rover Evoque continued to grow with an increase of 6%. They 751 units from 706 units in May of 12. The Range Rover Evoque is up 26% from 2012.
So the entry-level Range Rover.
The entry-level Range Rover,
that's right. The cheapest of the expensive ones.
That's right. And so for Land Rover, 2013 year-to-date sales of 19,516 units are the highest first 5 months in the history of the brand in the United States. The previous high had been in 2006 when they sold 19,100 units. So
interesting.
So next bit of news. Land Rover, and this one was released recently, Land Rover quietly building a third body shop. So it seems that they have a body shop in Solihull that's going very well. They just completed a second body shop and they're framing out a third one. And the thought is, in the article that I read, that this third body shop might be to help out with the Range Rover hybrid. And that they have enough. Obviously, it would just kind of supports the sales are increasing and sales are doing very well. There's enough demand. They need a more body shop to build more units. So,
well, I think they may also be getting into more complex construction, which may take more space and line capacity to build. And they don't just slap together with a bucket of bolts anymore like they used to.
Yeah.
So it takes a little more sophisticated infrastructure to put them together.
Right.
And now, am I correct in my understanding that they have now switched some models over to a unibody all aluminum design?
I think I did see that in this article about the aluminum. Yes.
I'm pretty sure I saw that for the new Range Rover Sports.
Would that mean
Yeah,
the LR3,
right.
the Disco 3s would be also, or are they going to depart the Sport from the 3 platform, the Disco 4 platform?
That I don't. They're talking about how they're building the L494 bodies. Which one's that?
I'm sorry, I've lost my ability to track the numbers.
Me too. I did. That's why. And then in this article, which by the way is from just-auto.com, says maybe those rumors about the X260, a supposed alloy-framed XF replacement, are true. While maybe that's had to do with Jaguar.
That would be Jaguar.
But it seems like there's some relationship there. But here, a little interesting thing. I just lost it. Oh, yeah. On the tour of this quiet, sparkling clean facility where, apart from the robots and shiny aluminum panels, the main thing you notice is few people. Despite the lack of visible population, this is claimed to be the world's largest capacity aluminum body shop. I think that's the first or second body shop.
And the interesting thing there, too, is that it allows them probably to share some capacity with Jaguar if needed.
That would be the case. Oh, it looks like the L405 is the still new Range Rover. That's
okay.
The L405. I'm not sure what the 49. What did I say earlier? 494 is, but so.
Yeah, I can't keep up anymore. It's difficult.
So that's all sounds good stuff.
Back when they built the same thing for 30 years, it was pretty easy to follow.
Right.
It's getting tougher all the time. They're becoming like the rest of the automotive world and changing themselves too often.
Right. And next bit of news is my favorite, Land Rover diesel hybrid set for the United States. Of course, we're in the United States.
Not just a diesel, but a diesel hybrid. That's interesting.
Yes, I did read that. Right, yes. Land Rover will introduce a diesel hybrid Range Rover and Range Rover Sport to the U.S. in the next couple of years. The new hybrid will initially go on sale in Europe after its debut in Frankfurt. And because it changes to European regulations and U.S. demand have improved the business climate. And this is from Edmunds.com.
Awesome.
I thought I also read, I didn't save this article, but I did think I read there was supposed to be an all-diesel too. Well, not just a hybrid, but like an actual diesel. Because the European, the U.S. has higher diesel standards than the Europeans, but the Europeans are changing theirs, and then the demand seems to be increasing. So,
well, I think really what it boils down to is increasing demand.
Yeah, I think there's a combination because obviously by having to suddenly meet stricter standards in Europe, it's okay to spend the money to meet the stricter standards.
And it's an easier thing to do at that point. You don't have to build beyond what you're already doing just to make a new market.
Exactly.
Yeah, the article here says we expect to see both V6 and V8 turbo diesel models ready for the U.S. alongside the diesel hybrid.
Oh, that TD V8 is a bitchin' engine.
Is it?
Oh, God.
Really?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Nice.
For podcasts, you post listening, he's smiling,
Oh, yeah.
and Harold doesn't smile often.
Nope. That engine will make me smile.
Really?
Oh, God, yes.
How many?
They call it the Lion.
Really?
And no, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head.
Okay,
But
that's still.
it's there. I mean, it's basically you take their most potent V8 and it's right there in the same park, except that it clatters nicely.
Good.
That's awesome.
And it gets good mileage and it lasts forever and all those kind of really cool diesel things.
And podcast is over, everybody. That's the best news we've heard.
They call it the Lion.
They call it the Lion. Is that a Land Rover specific diesel,
I believe
or
so.
That's not something they made for like Jaguar made it, or it comes from Buick back in the 1960s.
And Caterpillar. No, I believe it's an all Land Rover engine.
Nice. And
But don't quote me on that because I'm not really certain of its heritage. Things I've read about it are kind of vague, and it's been a while, honestly.
all right, next bit, which I did in pre-production, I didn't tell you about, but I don't have this in front of me, but I swear I read that the new Defender has been shelved. Like the whole idea of having a new redesigned Defender has been completely shelved. I think I saw that Tata says they don't have enough money. They were going to build it in India, and they're not going to do that now. And then so the whole plan has been shelved. Now there was nothing said about that. I assume the reason I say I read one article, I don't think it's official, and they don't. And was no in that article that I read, which I wish I should have saved it better. Didn't say what was going to happen next, or they can continue to build the current Defender or not. So that you may want to look for that bit of news. It's something I know we're certainly interested in. We'll be tracking.
Certainly ought to look into that for the next podcast.
I think we should do that. Look at that.
Yeah.
My first reaction to that would be, I'd be great if they could keep building the same one. I don't think they probably can, regulation-wise, but if that means they have to shelve the current plans until they figure out a design that actually works, hey, that's fine with me too, because I'd rather wait a bit for one that's actually cool than to have them rush through something that's disco based and stupid.
Agreed.
Yeah, I'm taking a peek now, and it looks like that is the case. There's a few articles popping up about it now.
Okay.
Yeah, and I had read the same as well.
Final bit of news. And this I found from Atlantic British, their rover parts site, was spy shots of the next generation Freelander 3 emerge. But when you read the article, it kind of comes across that it may not, in fact, be the Freelander 3. It may, in fact, because they say here that the vehicle bears a striking resemblance to the Range Rover Evoque. So this looks like an Evoque. Maybe it will be, maybe it's going to be a rebadged Evoque is an LR3 or an LR2 or a Freelander 3. I wish I'd get rid of the LR name.
Well, I think common platforming is probably a sensible thing for them to do, and they can just... with some trim changes and a few skin changes, they could have two models. And given the apparent success of the Range Rover Evoque, there's maybe room to do a Land Rover version of the same vehicle.
And then the article here says it might be an Evoque XL, or they were even considering renaming it an Evoque XL. So it sounds like it might be longer or bigger than the...
It does look a bit bigger.
It does look bigger, yeah. Although the Evoque, when you see one on the street, it is small. I guess I'm so used to...
Right, and that looks bigger than that. It looks like there's maybe more heft in the middle, like they've raised the waistline on it.
Well, the interesting thing is if it's going to be bigger... But it's going to be, say, a Freelander. It doesn't seem like it would be less money, but bigger seems to me it would be more money.
Well, sometimes the money is in the trim, not in the metal.
Good point. What's contained?
A little more metal is a little more cost, but they can dial content out of other places and equalize it out. And sometimes also, it wouldn't be the first time that manufacturers built two vehicles at identical cost and marked one way up.
General Motors did that every day.
Wasn't going to name names, but yeah.
Let's say the model will feature the 4-cylinder turbocharged engine currently used to power the Evoque.
Hey, I'm just looking at the picture here you have up on your screen, and I don't know, the shape is okay. It's not doing a lot for me, but tell you what, I would love to have that graphics scheme. I would drive that all the time. It's just so cool. It's
like a black and white camo.
Well, it's like a Cubert meets the Berlin camo. It's just...
Yeah, I don't think they let you drive like that.
Well, it doesn't mean you couldn't get somebody to make you one. That's a good vinyl wrap away from some being cool.
Totally, and it's even better than the zebra stripes in terms of confusing the eye.
Well, that is kind of the intention.
Exactly.
I like zebra. I think zebra stripes. That wouldn't go not
on a period Land Rover. They're cool. On a late model Land Rover, they're stupid.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you. All right, that's the news.
If you're listening, Mr. Zebra Truck, I'm sorry, but...
Yes, one of our regular panelists, Scooter, is a big Zebra fan.
Fortunately, he's never tried it on a late model truck yet.
I was going to say, he does have that disco now.
Yes, I know.
Give him time. Give him
Yeah,
time.
I'm just going to stop talking now.
All right, that's the news. Now we'll talk about some specific things that each of the panelists wants to talk about. And first up will be Mark. You wanted to talk about off-roading basics.
I did, and kind of wanted to keep it more of an open discussion with all of you guys, because most of you are more experienced with it than I. So just kind of some notes I've compiled over the past couple of years, and some, general common sense things that I've kind of come up with on my own.
While you were waiting for your disco to be trail-worthy?
Exactly.
Okay.
And now that I've taken it on the trail and broke it, I had time to go through my list again. So for the viewers, just a couple basic terms that people may not be aware of,
Mark,
but are
I have to
thrown
interrupt
around
you.
a lot when you're
We only have
off-roading.
3 viewers.
Well, I don't know who they are, do you?
There's no actual
I'm
view.
one.
They're all listeners, Mark. I'm just having fun with you.
Oh, jeez.
And I guess if you can turn your screen on, you'd be the 4th viewer.
That's right. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes. All right. One of them that is actually fairly important is approach angle. And this is just describing basically what kind of a hill you can run your vehicle into and make tire contact before you make bumper contact. And the same thing as departure angle, and this is for the rear of the vehicle. What kind of a hill can you come off of and keep tire contact without messing up your rear? As I found out on my vehicle, I could use a little bit better departure angle and overall clearance.
That's because you have a D2. That is the one drawback of the D2 over the D1.
Yeah, I was
That extra
very
7.2 inches in the rear decreases your departure angle dramatically.
Yeah, I was lucky to come out with my exhaust intact, but I did carry out, I'm going to guess, about 60 pounds of mud.
You need some spare topsoil at home?
Yeah, I've got some nice, fresh Zoo, Ohio soil now that's been spread around my yard. Breakover angle is, it's kind of strange to describe, but if you look at the side of a vehicle, you want to draw a triangle from the back side of the front tire. It's the lowest center point between the 2 tires on the chassis, and then to the front of the rear tire at the base. And basically what this angle describes is what you'd be able to, like if you wanted to go over the summit of a hill, if you would get hung up on the center because you're not high enough on either end, or if you're trying to come up and out of a ditch, the same kind of thing could happen. You can get hung up on your center. So it's all 3 of those. They sound kind of technical, being angles and everything, but they're definitely very important to know before you take your vehicle off-road, so you can at least try and visualize what your truck's actually going to be able to handle.
And they can happen in any number of situations, too. I think that's what maybe people don't realize. Going over a log, you could have all of those issues. And going over a small rise in a hill, or even actually being in a parking lot, you can get high-centered on a nice curb, one of those parking curbs. That stuff can happen.
Or if you're loading and unloading off a trailer, you've got all 3 angles to contend with the height of your trailer and the length of your ramp and what angle they make.
So, Mark, I take it you encountered all 3 of these when your most recent trip to the wilds?
To one degree or another. A lot of it was actually intentional, just to see where my truck was at and everything.
Finding your limits.
Yeah, basically. The whole idea for me taking the truck to the wilds is actually one of the things I wanted to cover, was finding out what the limits of your vehicle is in a safe as possible situation. Being tons of people already there, lots of pre-made trails. I had a carload of people with me, so it seemed like a good time to kind of push the truck around, see what it could and couldn't do, find out what my clearance was, what my clearance wasn't.
So what are some of the other basics that you would let people know for the first time or second or third time? I know a number of things that when actually thanks to Scooter, when I went off-road the very first few times, he was really good at giving me some basic tips. What kind of things have you picked up, Mark, that you would pass along?
One thing I would say is you don't want to be over eager or overconfident. If you have any doubt about what's in front of you or what's coming up, just get out of your truck and go take a look at it. If it's a puddle, you might want to poke it, see how deep it actually is.
If it's a hill,
looks like it's just,
if it's a hill, you want to see how steep it is.
Right. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are very deceiving until you actually get out and look at it. And a lot of the guys I was running with, even just at the Wilds, had been doing it many times, were very familiar with the trails. So I'd follow them, but there were also times that I would stop and, take a peek and see where my truck was standing at and what was really in front of it. So I think that's definitely an important one. Don't be too confident, and there's nothing wrong with getting out and taking a look.
No, that's just good trail etiquette anyway, to support that in anybody that's never been there before.
I've seen a number of people that I'm not going to name any names, but they say they've been off road. Oh yeah, I know what I'm doing, and then you get on the trail, and then 3 seconds in, they have never seen gravel, let alone a hilly area, or some leaves that are lightly that are covering a hillside that you don't know what's underneath those leaves, and they have no clue what's going on. I've seen 3 or 4 people get into trouble because they were overconfident in their skills and abilities and didn't take the off-roading seriously, is what it really, I guess, what it comes down to.
Yep.
It's not an amusement park, and I think that's all what I always worry about is people think it's an amusement park and everything's there's some safety and controls put into place.
Well, there's no shame in admitting that you don't have a lot of experience. It's okay.
Yeah, I've done lots of playing off-road, but I haven't done, serious trail rides. I haven't been in a Land Rover. I mean, this was my first time taking it out and really trying it out, so I was in and out of my truck a lot. One of the other things I think is a good idea, if at all possible, to have a co-pilot or a spotter with you that's at least somewhat experienced, or even if they're not that experienced, if they just, have some good common sense, to have them,
that's
keeping
actually
an eye on things too.
That's probably your number 2, maybe number 3 thing, is to have someone who's a spotting for you and using that person. You see the Camel Trophy videos, and you see other professional off-roading events. There's always 2 people in that vehicle. There's a navigator / spotter. There's a driver. So 2 people is actually almost critical. I mean, I would think number 1 is tires, but that 2 is the driver not being overconfident in my mind, and 3 would be having a spotter. But
so the other thing is, even no matter how well you know your vehicle, you can get within inches of something when you have a spotter. And you're far more likely to either be over-judging how close something is and giving yourself too much room, or just hitting whatever you're trying to avoid when you're doing it all yourself. And obviously it's a lot slower going when you're constantly getting out of your vehicle to check.
Right. And there, just simple stuff. There were a couple of times, after you've been through some really bad mud for a while and you're, pulling the wheel back and forth, you may think your wheels are straight, and they may not be straight. And that can actually be a bit of a problem when you're doing, like a rock climb. There was a small rock climb where we just were this past weekend, and I got out, looked at it. I was like, I think we can do it. It doesn't look like anything that we can't clear. I told my brother, I was like, first run, you're going to watch me go up it, and you're going to make sure I don't do anything stupid and, keep me in line with where I need to be. And it worked out fine, but not having a spotter, I think I'd have been sweating bullets the entire time, thinking I'm going to, pop a hole in my diff any second now.
One thing I don't think a lot of people, and Mark, I don't think you may realize this, is the difference in the truck you're driving, especially in the Land Rover community. A lot of people get introduced into Land Rovers with a disco, maybe an older Rangy, and then they get excited and interested, and they're like, "Oh, I want to go back and get myself a series truck, or maybe even if they're lucky enough a Defender," and don't realize the difference between those vehicles. In particular, it's really most likely you're not going to have power steering, or you're not going to have power brakes, and that's
or really good brakes,
or just brakes, and most likely you're going to go from an automatic to a stick. And there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that you need to recalibrate in your mind when you're going off road with those vehicles. And I don't think a lot of folks.
Not to mention the horsepower difference.
See, and you can add to the list of differences
Oh, yeah.
between, shall we say, a modern rover and maybe a heritage rover, whatever
Right.
word you want to use. So, and Mark, I don't think you've encountered that yet, but I know you're starting to get the disease, and someday you may encounter that. You should be lucky to have that problem.
Well, once the
Yeah,
disco gets too easy, then you step up to the series truck for the additional challenge.
And that's actually the one spot that I did finally get stuck. A Series 3 got stuck just after me. And I think I got out by sheer horsepower. And that just wasn't going to happen with the Series truck.
That Series 3 always gets stuck, but that's another issue altogether.
Yeah, he was stuck pretty good.
I've seen that Series 3 stuck a lot.
But it was the same deal. We bottomed out, and I was able to, get it rocking enough and get enough horsepower on the wheels to get myself back out. And I just don't think it had the power to have done the same thing.
You don't play the wheel speed game in a series truck. You don't play the articulation game in a series truck.
Yeah.
Not at all.
It's about hammering it through and picking your line carefully before you even start. Because once you're committed, you're
committed. Yeah. Well, and I go back to one of my previous comments. Tires. That's we're looking at kind of a list here that Mark has put together. I don't see tires, but tires I think is your number one. Having good tires, I just think cures a world of ills. But that's me.
Yeah, I was trying to avoid vehicle modifications, but you're probably right. I don't know that tires should really count as a modification so much as a need.
I would agree.
Technically, they are a modification, but it's such an easy mod, and it's easily reversible too.
Yeah, that's true.
But you need good tires. I mean, you can, technically you can go a lot of places on the tires that Land Rover gives you when you buy it new, but you can go a lot more places with better tires.
And a lot easier.
And yeah, a lot less effort.
Yeah.
Yeah. And while we're talking about tires, you definitely want to make sure you have a spare tire. Preferably a spare tire that matches the 4 you actually have mounted on the vehicle.
Especially if you're going off-roading, because you may need to get off the trail, and I think that's your point.
Yeah, if you think you actually might need that tire, which you probably will when you're off-roading, it should match.
Yes.
All right. Well, when we were out this last week, Dave was underinflated, rolled his tire off the rim, put his spare on, and we spent an evening remounting his spare onto the wheel because you just never know when you're going to need it. And in that case, he didn't even get a flat or anything like that. He just had too low a pressure and literally ran the wheel off the rim.
Lost the bead.
So, yeah.
He'll be shopping for bead locks next, I'll just bet.
I hope not. And on the same thing, inflation. I think that's pretty important. It's something I've been playing around with actually a lot, just highway driving, beach driving, and while we were off-roading this past week, I was watching what a lot of other people were doing and then not doing it.
That's actually a critical and important skill.
Yeah, learning what not to do is almost as important as learning what to do.
I was behind a fairly experienced driver, I won't name names, and they were way, way underinflated for the whole trip. And for some of the stuff we were doing, that was fine, but there was a particular spot where we were doing a really steep angle that we were driving sideways on, and their underinflated tires were kicking the rear end of the truck out from under them constantly. And I'm sitting there sweating bullets. I mean, we're white-knuckled holding onto the truck, hoping we're not going to roll, and I'm watching his, and the rear end keeps kicking out because it was so underinflated. So it's one of those times I was glad I didn't follow the person in front of me's etiquette for off-roading. And then just some of the basics, I think, for actually what you're doing while you're inside the vehicle as opposed to what you would do normal driving. You definitely want two hands on the wheel all the time. You want to be careful not to ever cross your arms over each other when you're trying to steer back and forth. Keep your thumbs out. Don't let them get inside the wheel at all, because there are times if you hit a rock or even if you're in a rut kind of strange that the wheel will whip itself back, and it's a good way to break thumbs. An interesting one that I actually read about was your seating position. You want to make sure you're sitting up as high as you can in the vehicle so you have the widest view out the windshield. And you want to be wrist on top of the steering wheel, distance away from the steering wheel. And I guess that has to do with being able to put the optimum amount of leverage into the steering wheel throughout the full motion. That's basically how I sit in my truck anyway, so I thought that was pretty
much
interesting.
how I sit too. I don't do this whole leaning back and homies in the hood sort of thing.
Yeah, I sit, pretty straight up and pretty close to the wheel.
Of course, there's no real option in a series truck anyway. You're sitting straight up and you're real close to the wheel no matter what you want to do.
You're sitting where they want you to sit.
You're sitting where there's room to sit, and that's it.
Exactly. Whether your elbow is out the window or not.
Something I picked up on that you would think's common sense, but from what I saw, apparently not. There was a D90 with a nice roll cage,
There
soft
you go.
top.
All right, that's all you need to say about common sense.
He was running all over the place, had passengers all the time, and 9 times out of 10 when I'd look over, the passengers had their hands wrapped around the roll cage. It wasn't on grab handles or anything like that, just flat out holding on to that roll cage. I guess they didn't get the point of why the roll cage was there. Because if they roll it, they're all losing hands and fingers and stuff that they would probably be able to walk away with this, without any injury at all.
So
but instead they're going to have crushed hands.
They're not going to think to pull their hands back when it goes over.
Like at amusement park.
No,
keep your hands
they're
and
going to
feet
be holding on tighter.
Yeah, keep your hands inside the ride at all times.
Until it comes to a full and complete stop. We were off-road once a couple of years ago at Mar, actually, and I have on videotape one of our brethren in the club sticking his hand out the side of his disco. He's driving, and he tries to push off on this tree.
It's instinctive.
It's instinctive,
stupid.
and it wasn't going to help any. Thankfully, he didn't lose a hand or hurt himself, but it's one of those things, a habit you do not want to have.
Right. Let's see. I think that was a lot of the general stuff.
I like how your list was focused on modern cars. You said you had to keep both hands on the wheel at all times. You can't do that in a series truck, Mark.
True.
Well, you try to keep them on there as much as you can.
You do. Sometimes you got to go to the.
You really do.
Sometimes you got to go to the gear shift, though.
Well, you do have 4 other sticks to contend with.
That's true. Mash the right pedal. Which one? The one that's yellow, red? I don't remember.
I think you should always have, everything you can conceive with you. All the recovery gear you could possibly need should be with you and in your truck and packed appropriately. When I say appropriate, things like your high lift jack just should not be inside your vehicle. That's just dumb.
No shackles lay on the ground?
No. I have 3 or 4 recovery bags in the back of my truck, and they're all, corded and strapped down, and the high lift up on top. Nothing moves anywhere unless I undo it. So even if I roll the vehicle over, those things are staying in their bags, strapped where they're at. And it's one of those things you think is common sense, but you need to prepare before you go out, even for an easy drive. Make sure you have everything set up, everything's where it needs to be, and everything's locked down. On the same note, you should have a general first aid kit with you, or at least somebody in your group should have a pretty good first aid kit. You should have something to pump up tires, something to patch a tire if need be. Something I've noticed a lot of people don't do, and it's something I've been doing. A lot of people carry spare fluids. A lot of people don't carry anything to contain the fluids they lost that they're replacing. And I think that's something you should be doing. So I carry one of those small oil pan containers. That's got a lid on it.
That's if you have the time to get the oil pan out and underneath the area that's losing.
Right. And a lot of times
you're going to voluntarily remove the fluid from your vehicle.
No, I'm assuming, you hit a rock and your oil pan is gushing or something. You can get that under and, collect a good bit instead of just letting all of it hit all over the ground.
It's a good idea.
That's true. You can catch some of it at least.
Right.
And you should try to keep as much of it off the ground as you can.
And I was thinking, the place we want the wilds, it's a zoo, it's a conservatory or whatever it is. I'm pretty certain they wouldn't have appreciated any of my fluids just kind of hanging out, along with the body parts of my truck I lost. It's another thing that I think is kind of annoying. Driving around and we saw, body panels and stuff laying in the mud. I picked up all of mine as soon as I got my truck unstuck, and I know some people didn't. And that's just general trail etiquette that I think should be followed.
Well, it's just like littering. You need to police your trash.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not just littering and trash, it's actually a hazard. I guarantee the stuff that I had left, my front bumper in mud ruts, would have messed up somebody's vehicle if I'd left it there. So, general vehicle maintenance, before you go out, inspect your vehicle really good, make sure it's greased up and oiled up everywhere it can be. And then when you're done playing, you got to do it again.
Yeah, that's really an important one, too, because when I'm guilty of it, too. You just want to go out, so you just jump in and go and don't check stuff. And then you get out in the middle of the trail and realize you got a massive fuel leak, and, gee, am I going to have enough to get me back off the trail and down to the gas station? It's going to be close.
Right. And then, your day's ruined, and so is probably 3 other people. So
it takes the fun out of it. If it doesn't ruin the day, at least it adds stress to it that doesn't need to be there. And just, take an extra half hour, check your vehicle out before you roll.
Yep. So I did it before I got there. I got laughed at because I had a grease gun with me, but I greased up before I left.
Good deal.
Then if somebody broke a driveline, they'd be coming to you asking to borrow your grease gun.
Yep.
Exactly. And, plenty of people were playing in water, frequently. And for me, it's a good peace of mind to know that custom drive shaft I just put in, it was re-greased when I was done.
Heralds and Word.
In 1712, British apothecary Richard Stoughton was granted a patent for his Elixir Magnum Stomachum, or Great Stomach Elixir, giving birth to the patent medicine industry. Soon the market was flooded with products, some patented and some not, but most with little or no medicinal value. This trend eventually spread to the U.S., where increasing concerns over the potentially dangerous patent medicines resulted in passage of the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906. One of the first test cases of the Pure Food and Drug Act was a product that derived its name, and little else, from an ancient Chinese pain remedy made from the skin of the Chinese water snake. Dr. Stanley's snake oil was tested by the United States Department of Chemistry and found to contain mineral oil, turpentine, camphor, red pepper, and 1% fatty oil, most likely from beef. What's interesting is that this is similar in composition to modern capsaicin-based liniments, and quite possibly was more effective than the traditional Chinese preparations. However, since Stanley's snake oil did not contain anything that was actually extracted from snakes, the government prosecuted the manufacturer, Clark Stanley, for misbranding and misrepresenting his product. The government won the judgment, Clark Stanley was fined $20, and the term snake oil became synonymous with fraudulent products. The snake oil salesman has become a common element in Western movies, television shows, and other forms of popular culture, but thanks to the efforts of our government, snake oil-type products have all but vanished. Or have they? While the snake oil salesmen of the past are no longer traveling from town to town peddling dangerous elixirs disguised as healthcare products, the snake oil industry is arguably still alive and doing well, pushing a new generation of questionable products masquerading as car care. Used car dealers use detailing products to make their cars shine like new. However, these products are basically just oils that sit on the surface, and soon after your check clears, the oils either wash away or they attract dust and dirt, and before long your shiny new car starts to look old and dull. There are many products claiming to remove scratches and restore lost shine. These are usually just waxes and oils, sometimes with pigments to match the color of the paint. They're not necessarily bad, as they can help to hide surface defects, but they don't really fix anything, and their effects eventually wash away. There are many products that claim to restore lost power, quiet, noisy parts, or reduce oil consumption when added to your engine. If the problem is due to excessive amounts of gummy deposits or sludge buildup, then these products can sometimes help. But if you don't quickly change the oil and filter, the loosened deposits can just settle out somewhere else and possibly make things worse. If the engine has problems caused by worn or damaged parts, there is absolutely nothing that can be poured into the oil and produce measurable and lasting results. No magic liquid can replace missing metal. More than just wasting your money, there is another type of automotive snake oil which can actually do more harm than good. These are products designed to stop leaks. They claim to clean and condition the seals of your engine or transmission to restore proper function. What they really do is attack the seals with a potent solvent, which causes them to soften and swell. While this often does reduce leakage, it also tends to weaken the material, causing the seals to wear out even quicker. Soon the leaks return, quite often with a vengeance. Since it seemed to work for a little while, some people try again, and before long, it's like a heroin addiction. They're constantly pouring this poison in a futile attempt to find the happy fix they once enjoyed. Even more potentially dangerous are the products designed to stop coolant leaks. Any product capable of plugging a hole in your radiator is also capable of plugging the small internal passages in the cooling system, especially if its chemistry is not compatible with the coolant. This can result in annoying problems like loss of heat inside the cabin, or expensive problems if the engine overheats due to diminished coolant flow through the radiator. Despite what claims are made on the product label, these products should be used very carefully and only as a last resort in an emergency. If you must use it, seek professional guidance from a qualified technician, not a salesman, as soon as possible. Despite the increasing amount of regulation in the automotive industry, there is still very little being done to enforce the validity of the claims made by these automotive patent medicines. Just like the old saying goes, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Be very cautious when mixing cocktails in your automotive fluids, and if you're not sure, seek professional advice. Don't trust the snake oil salesman.
Topic 2 will be mine. I want to talk about video recording on the trail. This kind of goes along with Mark's basic off-roading. Just a couple things that I like to do a lot of video, and some of the things I've come across, and I guess etiquette and some of the things I've been interested in over the years is where do you put the camera? What cameras do you use? And again, some of the etiquette with it. So first thing is I have like to use the GoPro cameras. That's the one I actually have 2. And the GoPros are pretty nice because they're small, they're compact, and they have cases that you can go underwater with them. And then they also capture sound, and the sound's not the greatest. It's still, if you want good sound or if you want good night vision, you definitely want to use a better camera, better HD VC. What do they call those? I won't say VHS camera. That's not the right term. But a camcorder. So I still think having both a camcorder and having a GoPro or something equivalent to that, there are other models out there, is important because I think the GoPro captures some of the nice action off-road footage in weird, unique, interesting ways.
Oh, yeah, when you strap it to the diff and go driving through the water, that is just the coolest thing.
It is, actually.
Little fish swimming around your drive line.
It's great. Exactly. You can put it up on a roof rack. You can put it on the side of the truck. You could all those kinds of neat things.
And you're just not going to want to do that with your camcorder.
And I've tried. I have over the years.
You've gone underwater with your camcorder?
That's one thing I didn't do.
Okay.
But I did.
Say, you're not going to try that.
I got close.
Okay.
But I had a device for my camcorder to stick it on the side of the truck and put it in different interesting, unique places. Over the years, we did do that.
I've seen that. Yeah.
I've seen that. Yeah. And so, besides why I think it's important to have both. A kind of a small, unique camera that goes in interesting places, and also having the camcorder, because also the GoPro isn't good at low light, and having a camcorder that's good in low light you may not be off-roading at night, but like for us, we're sitting a lot of times around the campfire and telling good stories, and I like to see people, and you don't want to have that Klieg light on them, so it's nice if you have a good low-light camera to capture that ambiance, if I can use that word, around the campfire and getting some good stories. Because while it's, at least for the folks in my club, I found that, as I like to do videos for them, is they want to see their truck in action, but they also enjoy the camaraderie around the fire and the conversations that go on too. So having a camera that picks up good conversation is also important in all day and night situations.
And some of the times that I've sat down and watched some of the various club videos with non-rover people, even they enjoy sort of the character development, and some of these campfire shots really sort of help to make the people more relatable for the audience, especially when they're not actual members and don't go to these things.
Right. It's not all just truck.
Right.
And, yeah, exactly. So having a GoPro, having a good camcorder is, I think, important. I still use both. I have both. Of course, you got to take and encode that video and take it back to your computer, and you got to put them together. But that's always the case. It's just, if you want good footage, that's going to happen. I mean, if you just want to put it out to YouTube, go right ahead. More power to you. That's not my way. I like to edit and cut them up, but and have a good picture.
Well, that's your artistic vision.
I guess that's my artistic vision, yes. And because it's the same thing with photography. And it's a little side note, but nothing kills me and bothers me more than people putting all 400 pictures up on their Flickr account, and then you have to wade through them all. And to me, that's the same thing with video. If you take all this video, you shouldn't put all the video up. You need to edit it and cut it and do things with it. So doing all that is important. A kind of a rule of thumb I've had is, you're probably going to take, for every hour you take, you might get a minute. Is that what it is? Is it a minute? No, you're going to spend, for every minute of final footage that you are going to have in your video. So if you end up producing a 20-minute video, you're talking about 20 hours of work, whether that's recording, editing, encoding, revising and reproducing the whole thing. So there's something to consider if you're doing video and want to take that, and you're going to go back and produce something and maybe get something that's of quality, at least as in my estimation, you're probably talking about an hour per minute when you're all said and done. So if it's a 10-minute video, I would rule of thumb, you're talking about 10 hours of activity to get there. So it's
actually not at all unreasonable when you consider some of the shows you see on TV, when you start looking at the behind-the-scenes stuff and how many hours upon hours of raw footage they shoot for one finished episode. And it takes a whole crew a month to produce it.
And they position cameras in a place, and they have people that go over the site first, and then they come back.
Yeah.
And they have producers.
All that stuff. They've got a whole crew,
right?
And a whole team at home doing the finished production too.
Right, and we don't have that. So one of the etiquette things,
we've got a guy and a box of cameras.
We got a guy and a box of cameras, right? And one of the etiquette things is, if I'm on the trail, I tell people, if you're going with me, I get out of the truck a lot. I take pictures. I take video. I'm going to reposition the camera. And if you don't like that, don't ride with me, because
it takes some patience to ride with you.
It does. It absolutely does. Because not only do I like to drive, I like to take the pictures and I like to take the video and have all that information done, and it takes time. So you are going to, someone shooting good video and good audio, taking good pictures is going to slow down the trail, and something to take into account. If you're going off road and you've got 20 trucks, they don't want to. All those 20 trucks don't want to spend the time waiting for you to reposition cameras. So you need to take that into account, or maybe split your off-roading into smaller groups. So just some things to consider if you're doing that.
Or plan on spending a little less time driving and a little more time doing the video stuff.
Or have someone to help you take the video.
Split it up, split the chores up.
Exactly. And if you're driving, you're not holding that camera. I don't care what you're doing. You shouldn't be, but B, because you can't focus and concentrate.
Certainly not if you're driving a series truck.
It's not going to happen. Yeah, I actually did do that once. We're bouncing down the trail in the 109, all those rocks, and I was holding the camera because all you had to do.
Yeah, I've done that too. It did not work well.
It is bad.
You're driving, I'm holding the camera, and we still can't see squat in the picture.
So those are things to consider, and then
especially when you hit that rock.
Oh, that was.
We saw this great shot of the dashboard coming at the camera.
That was a different off-road experience. Yeah, I didn't see that rock.
Felt it.
Well, it was a big rock. So
Yeah, it's now a foot further off the trail, too.
I was clearing the trail for
Absolutely.
others.
You were doing a public service.
That's public service, exactly. And then the
So much for pre-scouting.
yeah, that's true. Well, someone had just gone on that trail and they missed the rock entirely, and it was a small little hill, and yeah.
No one thought that rock was going to be a problem for
and no
anybody.
one thought there was no exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And then you came along.
And I came along in my series
Then
109.
they met John.
That's right.
Charging up the hill.
Well, and this goes to my final
Look
point.
out for that rock. What rock? Boom. Oh, that rock.
That rock, yeah. So this goes to my final point, and this is not something I've done yet, but I'm considering, is being able to scan ahead on the trail and also take interesting, cool video is using a quadcopter, or what others may call a drone, a small personal drone. And there is one that I've seen that I've been interested in for years, is an AR Parrot, and they have the AR Parrot 2. It's about $300 now. And it will stream video to your iPhone, and you control it from your iPhone. Has about a 20-minute duration charged on electricity, but it's a quadcopter. It'll go up, it'll hover. From what I can gather, what I've seen, you could actually send it up, say up ahead in a trail, have it hover, and then you could drive through and then recover it. But you've got about 20 minutes duration, and in it staying aloft, and of course as much as you can get on your iPhone or your Android device to store it. So
Is that the one they used in the Top Gear Nile River special?
they might have. I never saw.
They had something like that, and they were scouting, looking for a way to cross the river.
Oh, I never saw what aerial reconnaissance they used. So, but this would be a personal aerial reconnaissance device.
I just know it was a little radio-controlled thing with rotors and cameras. And
That might have, yeah. Well, this is a small camera. There's actually two. There's a camera that shoots straight down and one that shoots out. And I think
they could aim the cameras.
aim the
too.
cameras. I don't know that you. I think you aim the device with a Parrot. I think you aim the device, so you might have to have it low or something to get a good shot. But it certainly is an interesting concept and idea. I'm just not ready to pony up $300 just yet for the privilege of testing it out.
It's a cool toy.
It would be a cool toy, yes. I'm trying to think of other uses in my own personal life, like launch it from my roof, but that would be about it. And in the United States, you can 400 feet up is I guess you can fly something. That's what I wanted to say. You can fly something up to 400 feet above ground. That's when the FAA kicks in for having flight regulations and flying a flight plan and all that business. So you can have one. You can get one today, and you could fly it and potentially take some good video. So, anybody have any experience with any of the quadcopters or drones?
No, it sounds
Just
very
been-
cool, though.
Yeah, it's just something I've been researching. The one thing about this one that was upsetting to me was the battery life. I was actually seeing reports of it, as low as 12 minutes of airtime, which I think is
But for what it's
terrible for $300.
Yeah, but for what it's doing, I mean, it's flying four rotors. It's creating its own personal Wi-Fi hotspot because it's connecting to your phone. Then it's running two cameras and streaming that information back to your phone. I think 12 minutes is pretty good.
It's definitely impressive. It's just iffy, I think, for me.
I think it's the
It'd be nice
cost.
to see if they had a gas-powered one.
Well, we can convert it.
That could be interesting. I mean, they definitely have a longer flight time.
Well, then I think you need a second person to run it. That's when you need a
Okay.
person. Yeah.
One to fly it and one to interpret the data.
Well, one to fly it, one to drive the vehicle. So
Well, I was reading that there was some kind of way you could actually pre-program these, some kind of like a director mode, so it would fly specific patterns or maneuver specific ways preemptively, which I thought was really cool.
So you just sort of run it down the trail once and then, set up your shots and then have it follow you or do whatever.
I think it was something like that, or it might have been you could program it to do a specific maneuver if you hit a button or something like that.
So I think the answer we have is you need two of them. Because if you're only running 10 or 12 minutes at a clip, maybe 20 if you're lucky, one will have to go out, scout the trail, set up the shot, and then fly it back, and then you send the other one, and then you run, and then meanwhile you're charging number one, while number two is finally taking the picture.
You'll have to have them communicate so you know the routing. And then
How about we just get two
self-aware,
batteries
really in
in
trouble.
one? How about two batteries in one drone? That might be cheaper.
Yeah, a spare
that's an
battery
idea.
pack is a thought.
Which
That's
is-
the sensible alternative.
sensible.
That takes the fun right out of
It
it.
does. That's like what you got to do with the GoPro. You have to have three batteries.
I think you just need an engine on it with a backup generator to keep those batteries charged.
Well,
I'd be closer to splitting the purchase of one drone and 2 batteries than I would split the purchase of 2 drones with you, though.
we have our own drones, and then you can have games with them.
We have the drone wars.
Drone wars.
Moving along, our third topic is British wiring. And of course, that results in the 4-letter word which has been British engineered to take 5 letters. Lucas. So I think we'll start by tossing out our Lucas jokes here, and then we can move on from there. So anybody got any?
I think Morgan. I'm sure Morgan does.
Oh, just the classic, don't let the smoke out.
You know why British drink warm beer? They have Lucas refrigerators. Just a quick comment, on the idea of the Lucas refrigerators. In the late 70s, when it looked like the British automotive industry was about to go extinct, Lucas was exploring different things to do to try and keep themselves alive, and they wanted to explore some other ideas for products, and they tried a number of things, and they actually even branched into household equipment, thinking people still need a place to live, they're going to need things for their home, and one of the products they tried making was a vacuum cleaner, and to this day it was the only thing they'd ever made that didn't suck.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's a long one, but
that was good. That wasn't too bad.
Anyway, moving along, let's get into it. The one cool thing I will say about British wiring, and yes, there is a cool thing, and that is that it's universal. Everybody used the same system. Everybody bought their stuff from Lucas, and so the components would interchange, which is really kind of cool, because if you've got some old junk from a Jaguar laying around, you can use it on your Land Rover because it's the same stuff. The MG stuff fits. It's all sort of the same parts. So if you can find it for one, you can find it for the others, which is cool. The other thing that's really cool is that the whole system is standardized right down to the color codes. So if you can figure out the wiring system for one kind of car, you can work on all of them. If you know the wiring in your Land Rover, you can find your way around a Rolls Royce. It's all the same stuff. I can walk up to any vintage British car. If I see a blue wire, I know it's for the headlights. If it's blue with a red stripe, it's for the low beams. If it's blue with a white stripe, it's for the high beams. I know this, and I can find my way around anything without a wiring diagram. And that is cool, and you don't see that pretty much anywhere except in the British world. So that's cool. On the downside of that, that means they all have the same problems. And when people talk about the wiring system, it's really not the wire itself that's the problem. I mean, sometimes it's undersized and overworked, but really the wire itself isn't defective wire. It's not poorly made. It's just, it's overworked. It's sometimes too small. It's not protected properly. It's got a lot of atmospheric issues. But the wire itself is basically okay. The one thing about it, though, that's kind of weird is that they don't use standard wire gauges. It's not like you can say, oh, that's a number 10 wire, or it's a 12-gauge wire, or a 14-gauge wire. No, they do it differently. They count the number of little strands of copper, and that's how they size their wire. So you got to know if you need a 28-strand wire or a 14-strand wire. And of course, it's not actually corresponding. So if you have a tool that's designed to precision strip a 16-gauge wire, it's not going to work quite right. So you got to kind of learn to play the game when you're working with the wire. But that's kind of an odd thing. But other than that, the wire itself is basically okay. But the British, for some reason, have this aversion to fuses, and that's really where the big problems come in the wiring harness. I mean, it's in a Series 2, you've got 2 fuses. One of them does the dome light. The other fuse does everything else. I mean, literally everything else that they choose to put behind a fuse is on that one fuse. And of course, there's a ton of stuff that they don't fuse because, well, fuses are unreliable, so they just hook the wire up direct. I guess the wire is self-fusing. I don't know. But, that's the big thing is they just don't like their fuses.
I know why the dome light is fused. and everything else is on its own separate fuse.
Okay.
So when the everything fuse blows, you still are able to see to repair that fuse.
That would be a good guess. That would be a good
That was
guess.
my Lucas joke.
Or it gives you, well,
or
actually,
to
it's
have
not
a
much of a
spare
joke.
fuse.
That's real.
Or to have a spare fuse.
An extra spare fuse, because there's actually in the Lucas fuse blocks there is a spot for 2 spares already. But if you have
Exactly.
2 spares plus your dome light fuse, then you're good to go. Now in the Series 3, they actually upgraded to 4 fuses.
Doubled. Yay!
Yes, they've doubled their redundancy and their protection. Although one of them did absolutely nothing by design, so really it's 3 fuses and a mounted spare. Go figure.
So has this gotten better with the modern trucks?
Certainly, the modern trucks are much better fused, and really that sort of thing is not really an issue with something like Mark would have. And so, Mark, you're kind of left out of this because what I'm talking about here is very much geared towards the more vintage trucks. Although some of the concepts do cross over, and in fact, your Disco shares a lot of the British universal wiring system. A lot of the wire color codes are still to this day being used, which is really cool. It gets a little more confusing because there's so much more stuff happening electrically in a modern one, so there's a lot of new color variations. But some of the basics are still there. I mean, you still have a red wire with a black stripe that runs your taillights. It's still there. I patched several broken ones in your truck, so I know.
Yeah, there's a lot of special wiring going on in that truck.
Well, some more special than others.
Yeah.
So why did this happen? Was this because of a shortage of fuses? Was this like a post-war thing? Was this just, or somebody thought they knew better?
I don't know if I don't really know the history on it. I think that it probably started out as they really only thought they needed this much, and then they just really didn't keep up with the increased demands on things. And then, like I say, I think that they thought some functions were just too critical to trust to a fuse, like headlights. However, the headlights, especially in a vintage Land Rover, are the one biggest draw item in your whole truck. So if there's a problem there, it's smoking your whole harness, and your whole truck is going to go dead before there's any protection involved. So that's kind of short-sighted in my opinion, and there are some ways to deal with that, and as we work through our discussion, we'll get there.
Well, I might end up having an answer for you.
Okay.
I have a book, and it's called "We Found Our Engineer."
Okay.
And I think it's a self-produced book, but that's fine. And I actually got it off Amazon. I'm hoping to have it done for the next read it in time for the next podcast and do a book report.
Cool.
Maybe that might be in there.
We can talk about some of the history of the British electrical system.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll see.
I think as far as the standards and the commonality, I think it's just because Lucas had a product on the shelf that they all could buy, and no one had to re-engineer anything.
Well, maybe part of the common British Leland concept,
this well
I guess, right?
predates Leyland.
Oh, does it?
Oh,
okay.
yes. This goes all the way back.
Okay.
You know, Leyland didn't become
the
a factor
Dark
until the
Ages.
60s, and even in the 50s, they were all using pretty much standard stuff.
The before time.
Before Leyland, BL,
Yes, that's right. Before, yes.
before the Dark Ages. Another big problem with the wiring harness itself is
There was a joke there we missed.
did we miss a joke?
Yeah, before the dark time, before British Leyland, the dark time, the fuses, electricity, dark.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a bad one.
All right. I went right over my head. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it took me a while. Maybe
I'm
I should.
sorry.
Maybe I should just cut this whole thing out. I don't know.
We can just ash can this whole discussion and start over next time.
No. You're doing great.
I was just going to say the other real issue with the wire itself is in the connections and the connections to the ground, especially because a lot of times the grounds are done to the body where you get corrosion between the connector and the body, or to the frame where you get the frame rusty and you lose your ground, and that's a very common failure point. The other is all the little bullet connectors, which were state of the art in 1938, but not really updated to keep up with things until really they were replaced with a more modern style connector in the 90s. But they're not inherently a bad thing, but they are prone to corrosion and dirt, and the increased resistance in there causes problems. Can actually create some overheating in the wire, but primarily it can just result in things not working properly.
So was this common at the time, or was Lucas already behind in the 50s and 60s.
Oh, I think they engineered stuff and they designed stuff and they built it at the period that they first had to do it. They went with what was the best available, and then they saw no real need to update because they had it. It seemed to work. They just
why innovate? Why make it better? It's already working, so there's no need to make it
which
better.
Which is very much the heritage of Land Rover and a lot of the other companies too. If they've got something that works, there's no real point in changing it.
Something to be said for that.
Yeah.
Right. And so the electrical system was very similar to the mechanical system.
I think the electrical system was perhaps the worst in this way, but things that probably should have been updated weren't because it was perceived to work. But I think the British have a higher tolerance for things that don't work right, and so it's just not as big a deal, and people put up with stuff. I don't know. The big problem with British electrics, and their real Achilles heel, as I see it, is the switch. The simple on-off switch has always evaded the British. Back in the 80s, there was this news story. There was an intrusion at the palace, and the Queen found herself a visitor in the middle of the night in her bedroom. And she had this little panic button next to her bed, as you'd think she would, which she pressed, and it didn't work because it was a Lucas switch. I don't know if it was a Lucas switch or not, but I mean, literally, this is no joke. The switch failed to work. Simple push-button switch didn't work when it needed to.
Which probably completed an electrical circuit. That's it, or interrupted one.
It probably just didn't make the connection.
Right, and then it failed in making that connection. That's all it was supposed to do.
That connection,
yeah.
Which, of course, brings us to...
she chatted with that guy until security arrived.
Did she really?
Yeah, she did.
She kept him busy.
She kept him busy, and he didn't harm her. So,
which is good. I wonder how long that took, given the
I seem to recall it was like 5 or 10 minutes that he was in the room, and she just ended up talking with him.
Yeah. But that brings us to one of my favorite Lucas jokes, which is about the switch, and there's a couple different variants on it, so I'll just sort of give you the long version. It's an old Lucas joke. People ask, how many positions are there on a Lucas light switch? And there's a couple different answers, so I kind of break it up and say that on your luxury models, Lucas had a couple different kinds of switches, and on the luxury models, there was a 3-position switch. Off, dim, and flicker. And on your more basic models, it was a 2-position switch. Off and dark. And if you have a vintage Land Rover, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes.
You'll often find yourself with a switch or two that's gone into full Lucas mode.
Yes.
It's either off or it's dark.
My 109 Series 3 had a switch that I was told never to touch because it would...
Well, that was the one that would make your entire wiring harness ignite.
Yes.
That was the infrared switch. That was a special toy of the military that they thought was going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. But it did one of two things. It either made sure that your lights never ever worked again, or it would make sure your entire wiring harness would never ever work again.
It was a safety feature in case you had to scuttle the vehicle.
Well, yeah, there's a whole manual on how to do that, actually. One of which is how to destroy the wiring, but I don't know why, because it's so easily destroyed.
All you had to do is turn it on.
Yeah,
that destroys the wiring right there.
There you go. But some of the more common switches to fail, the headlight switch, because it has a lot to do. There's a lot of current going through it. And especially when people start putting bigger bulbs in it so they can see further down the road. They put halogen bulbs, and especially those ones that are only legal for off-road use. And it just puts such a load through the switch that the switch just burns up. It gets dirty, it gets resistance, and it's a problem. And it actually can damage the wiring harness as well when it starts to go. The horn switch is delicate. Not so much on a Series 3 or an early Defender where it's on the stock. They don't burn up as quickly, but when those go, the bad thing is that's also your turn signal switch, that's your dimmer switch. So when that goes, you're throwing an expensive cluster assembly over your shoulder and getting another one just for a horn switch. The brake light switch, one of my favorites. Brake light switch came in 2 flavors. The early trucks, the Series 2, 2As, etc., before the dual circuit power brakes, the switch was a hydraulic switch, which sounds innocent enough. It it actually plumbs into your lines, and when you put your foot on the brake and you create pressure to the brake system to stop the vehicle, it also closes the switch and you have brake lights. Sounds good enough, right? Till you think about the fact that this is an electric device, a British electric device, mounted low on the frame, down where it's taking the mud and the salt spray and the water, and it's expected not only to function electrically, but it's also expected to keep the brake fluid from leaking out. Does this sound like a good combination to you?
Oh, of course. No.
Yeah, dandy. That's also becoming a rather unobtainium piece of hardware, too. And a lot of guys end up changing their brake system over to the more modern power brakes, dual circuit, at which point, with that brake tower, you have the ability to upgrade to the more modern, like the Series 3 and Defender pedal-mounted switch, which gets rid of that whole issue of leaking the fluid out, and it gets the switch up and out of the weather. Doesn't make the switch any more reliable, but it gets it up out of the weather.
It makes it a little more reliable in the sense it's away from some of the road salts.
It gets it in a cleaner
noise
environment.
and
They still seem to fail, unfortunately, and they're kind of expensive. And if you have to replace one, make absolutely certain you get the genuine one, says Lucas on the side. And a lot of guys preach about genuine parts versus aftermarket, and that's a whole other discussion. But my experience has been the Chinese and Indian knockoffs of this switch don't even work out the front of the box. You're really better off with the genuine Lucas switch. And then comes the fun of adjusting it. It screws into the pedal tower, and the difference between it being the brake lights being always on to never on is about a quarter turn. So you're screwing them in till they're always on. You back it off until they just go out. You tighten the lock nut, and then you check everything to see if it still works. And you're probably going to be fiddling with it for another hour until it's just right. And then next week it's going to fail, and you start the process over again. Fun, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Is this why the mechanic bill's so high?
Sometimes. Sometimes.
And another reason probably why they don't want to work on vintage trucks at your local Land Rover dealer. No,
it takes a little bit of patience on some of these systems, and that's one of those things that you just kind of want to look for another way to do it. And when I find it, I will certainly let you know. Good. Of course, the fun, a lot of the disco guys talk about when you get into the subject of the brake lights is the fact that the interlock for the automatic transmission is on the same circuit electrically with the brake light switch. Basically, just as soon as your brake lights come on, that power also feeds that little solenoid. So if your brake lights don't work, guess what? You're stuck in park.
Yeah.
And if you blow a fuse to your brake light circuit or your brake light switch fails, you can be on the side of a trail somewhere stuck in park, and you've got 40 trucks piled up behind you, and they can't go anywhere because you can't go anywhere. There are a couple of really cool trail fixes, and of course, if you've got an extra hour, I can fix that problem so it will never, ever happen again. Electricity or not, you will never be stuck in park. Of course, you didn't hear that from me, but we can do that.
Of course.
Instruments are a fun thing to deal with. Generally speaking, they're not as unreliable, although I've had fun with the fuel tank senders. They do wear out. They don't ground reliably through the fuel tank. They're expected to complete their circuit actually through the fuel tank and the bolts holding the fuel tank to the chassis. But yet the one side of the fuel tank has rubber isolators on it, so that doesn't quite add up to me. But I usually end up running a ground wire just to make sure that it does the job. But
sounds smart.
Yeah, those can be fun. The instruments themselves can be a little iffy. They can be fun to find if they do go bad. And of course, you have the fun thing of keeping track of whether or not you have positive ground or a negative ground vehicle, because the instruments are wired up backwards between the one and the other. You can't just change the polarity. You actually have to change all the parts or they don't work. Another interesting area to consider in the system is the charging system. The older trucks used a generator, which had minimal output, and a voltage regulator to control this generator, which was this really big, ugly box full of electromechanical contacts, and it was particularly unreliable, and the failure mode could result in either no charging or a fire. So, one or the other is going to happen eventually if you've got this system. So if you're after originality, that's one thing, but otherwise, most everybody converts to the alternator, which is the more modern system. It puts out much more power, it's much simpler to wire up, and it's just much more reliable.
And more reliable.
That fairly well covers my list of some of the issues involved with the system and some of the concerns with it. There's still much more to say about the British wiring, so maybe we'll hold off on the solutions to the problem for another podcast.
Good deal.
Definitely. Look forward to that as a Series 3 owner myself. So for our final topic today, I will give a quick overview of my frameover I'm doing on my Series 3 88 and the unfortunate story that goes with it. I've owned this Series 3 for probably about 4 years now. And
what year is it?
It's an 82.
82.
So it's one of the last ones. They went through 85, but it's definitely, well past when they were importing them into the U.S.
By 10 years.
Exactly. Well past. Very close to the Defender switchover, which was 85.
Right.
83, technically.
Yes. Sorry. They overlapped from 83 to 85.
Correct.
So how did you get your hands on this one?
So this one, I had actually been looking for a series for a while, and someone just a couple of towns down the road from me actually imported 3 different series rovers, and this was a 3 versus their others, which were all 2s and 2As. And this was the least expensive, so I could sort of get it and play with it, and I did some playing with it, but mostly I spent time working on it or just working on my commuter vehicles. So
was it a project when you got it?
No, it was actually drivable. Had some very minor issues, but nothing that was really preventing me from driving it. Other than the fact that I have when I actually went through the math and got it down to the shortest route possible, my commute is about 40 miles one way.
Wow.
So that turns out to be about an hour and a half commute with the Series 3. So I did not do that all that long before deciding that I would just sort of keep commuting with a regular vehicle. There are some upgrades I plan to do to the Series 3, so I can commute with it, but it's been sitting far too long. And in Vermont, we use tons and tons of salt on the roads, and while this was a wax-oiled chassis, there were a couple of areas where the wax oil had flaked off and salt got in under the wax oil and started rot on this very old frame.
That happens a lot with wax oil. That's my big gripe with it. It doesn't always have to flake off either. It just gets a little crack in it. The water gets in that crack and behind, and it's eating your frame, and you have no idea until a big chunk falls off.
Exactly. So yeah, it's had better days, and I went through quite a while of hemming and hawing and deciding whether I was going to just patch the frame or go and buy a galvanized chassis. And luck had it that I managed to get paid out for a whole lot of extra vacation time that I had built up because I worked clearly all too much. And someone down at the other end of the state listed a galvanized rolling chassis, all in roughly the same 2 weeks. So I ended up going down for a special trip, looking at this rolling chassis, and it was a very nice galvanized chassis. Axles, 2 1/4 engine, and gearbox, and all of that. The engine, pretty much nothing good on it. Who knows? There might be something salvageable there. But for the most part, I was like, this is great. This is a galvanized chassis. It's I'm pretty sure it's a Marsland. So a decent galvanized chassis compatible with the Series 3. So I managed to plan a weekend where I borrowed a truck, rented a U-Haul auto transport, took my Series 3 from northwestern Vermont down to southeastern Vermont, where I was going to be doing all of the Frameover. In the same day, then drove over to southwestern Vermont, picked up the galvanized chassis, and brought it back. And fortunately, I mean, I got back well after dark, so I was like, there's no way I'm going to unload it now. Woke up nice and early the next morning, very refreshed, started unloading it. I was just by myself, and it's a little bit of an odd location where I'm parking it. So there weren't any good trees nearby to winch off of or anything like that. I had a come-along and my high-lift jack, which I have the winching kit, which I have used for winching and stuff before. So I was fairly confident that I could safely lower this rolling chassis all by myself. I was using because I have the taller high lift jack, and it was a little too close to the truck. I actually was using the axle carrier as a block, or a pulley, which in hindsight was not a good idea. Now, when you are using the high lift jack for winching, normally you're pulling a load up. That works totally fine. Anybody who's used a high lift jack understands that when you lower a load with it, once there's no load on it, it releases and drops. So when you're lowering a load using the winching kit, normally you have pretty good tension on it. But when you wrap a chain around your axle carrier as a pulley, you can get too much friction. And after the fact, I found out that you actually have to have 150 pounds load minimum on the high lift jack for it to maintain the load without dropping when you're lowering.
That's a good number to know.
It is a very good number to know. And it was not listed, or I missed it when I was prepping. And this was on a slight decline, and I actually used a come-along to get the rolling chassis down to the ramps. Unfortunately, the come-along was not rated, or no longer had a rating listed on it. So I wasn't going to try to lower the whole thing with a come-along that I wasn't sure about, because I did not need to deal with a snapping line. So I transferred the load over to my high lift jack, and things were going fine. I got the wheels about halfway down the ramp when suddenly the friction caught up with me and the high lift jack dropped. Now, normally you have a tensioner line on there as well, and because the auto transports only have support under the wheels, the centers are empty, a high lift jack actually dropped a fair distance and twisted the chain just enough to drop the grab hook off the tensioner chain. So normally it would have been a very scary experience where the chassis rolled about 2 feet and, you catch your breath, get a beer. Line. Exactly.
Yeah, come back.
But all in a split second, all of the chains dropped off immediately, and the whole chassis just rolled off the end of the ramps. Now, fortunately, I'm one of those people that somehow my reflexes are good in that I can jump back and out of the way anytime this happens. I don't like to risk it. I was taking my time. So I had no injury, but I watched in slow motion, roughly.
No, it was slow motion. We know, we all been there.
Exactly.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
As it rolled off and about 8 feet down a very, very minor incline and hit 2 trees exactly on the very ends of the rear frame cross member, which those are not really reinforced at all. So it managed to bend those in just enough to let the 2 trees pop through behind them. And
I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing with you.
No, I totally. Now looking back at it, it's hilarious, and it's amazing that I aimed it so well without aiming at all. So it managed to stop itself against the tires of the rear axle, with the frame horns, the rear ones, bent in, hugging the trees. So it was completely wedged, and I know you guys have a photo you can look at. Completely wedged tire around tree to the rear frame. On both sides, one of the trees, fortunately, was a birch, and so that was pretty quick and easy to cut out. Not a big problem. But I actually did have to cut one of the trees down to extract the frame. And now I have a whole other project of repairing my frame.
And some firewood.
I got some firewood. I did. Won't complain about that. It's not
say
much
you
stuff.
could use those birch logs as wheel chocks next time.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was. That was a fairly devastating moment, having just spent a couple of grand on a rolling chassis. And
how much cussing?
There was a lot. Yeah. They could hear it all the way up the house, which is up through the woods. So.
They're probably still hearing it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I could hear it echoing off the hills on the other side.
The kids are having nightmares.
Yeah. So,
But so it's now you've been able to extract it now from the wedged between it's no longer wedged between the trees.
Exactly. No longer wedged between the trees. We used a chainsaw, cut down the tree, and hooked it up to another truck and pulled it out. And because we had to pull it sideways and then forward to get it out from the other tree. Yeah. And now
it looks like the one horn sprung back some after it passed the tree and just locked the truck right onto that one tree.
You couldn't hit it any better. So did you plan this?
I did not. If I had planned it, I probably would have hit just one of the trees dead center in the rear cross member, and I would have had to replace the whole rear cross member.
Right.
Hey, maybe that'll just kind of bow the ends back out, and that's your fix.
Exactly. One of my friends suggested I just, make it a new design and sort of angle the rear tub in a little bit on the corners.
Why not?
The new DC-100. Yeah, there you go.
You can just round it off in the back.
Exactly. And not too much wheel clearance, though, so.
Yeah, but it would have tremendous departure angle.
It's true. Yeah.
Or you could put a lot of Bondo in there and then have yourself some storage space.
Yeah, there you go. When in doubt, add Bondo to an aluminum skin. Yeah, that's a plan.
Exactly.
So what are your next steps now?
So I've been spending even today, the last couple of weekends just disassembling everything off of the rolling chassis because it's got all sorts of stuff on it that I don't need. And I would like to get it to the point where once I do the repairs on the rear cross member, if I have to do anything else, it's a light load, easy move.
So
if I have to take it anywhere.
What is the repair? Do you have a plan?
At this point, the first attempt is just to bend it all straight and see how close I can get it. It's bent pretty substantially.
Yeah, the picture we're seeing here is at least 45 degrees on the. I guess that's the left.
Yeah, it looks like 45 on one side and about 30 on the other. But of course, camera angles can be deceiving.
Right.
Yeah, they're fairly close to even.
Okay.
But yeah, roughly 45 and 35 or something like that.
Maybe you'll let us post this picture with on the website.
Oh yeah,
so
absolutely.
our viewers can see, or our listeners can see.
The Darwin Awards section or something.
Exactly.
No, he didn't hurt himself.
No, just Rover, a special Rover edition.
Yes,
Darwin
okay,
Award,
exactly. Yes. So yeah, pretty much I'm going to try to bend it straight, and it definitely creased some metal, so I'm going to have to at least reinforce. It's probably going to be the cheaper way to do it, and then repair the galvanizing. And I had actually had a couple of scratches in the galvanizing. Obviously not really a problem with galvanizing, but since I have a bare chassis, I was going to, repair that anyway.
Yeah, scratches in the galvanizing aren't really a problem until it scratches through the galvanizing.
Exactly, and it was scratched through and a little bit of surface rust, so nothing major, just, wire brush it and re-galvanize should do it.
So how bad is the repair to the outriggers? I mean, obviously got to pull them back, I guess. And how do you reinforce it? Do you put extra steel in there and weld it on, or?
Oh yeah, I would try.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think pretty much the main area that needs reinforcement, depending on how the bending back goes, the rear face of it may not need a whole lot of reinforcing, but the top and bottom will need definitely,
because those are
reinforcement because those are creased.
I think a gusset where the creases are is a good idea, and then I would even consider as a strengthening measure, take and run a piece at an angle from the very end back towards the frame rail, make a triangle out of it. It'll be a lot stronger than it ever was.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This may actually be a good thing for you. I mean, in the end, it may actually be stronger than. I mean, look how easy that thing.
I think he'd have a hard time not making it stronger than stock.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. Yeah.
But certainly, it's disheartening, and it added extra time and effort to your plans, and you probably wish you were already rolling. But
I'm sure it took the wind out of the sails. All excited, he's got this thing. He's going to get right into it, and now he's got couple weeks or a month or so.
He cleared time. He's got vacation
work just to get him back to where he was before the jack failed.
Exactly.
Yep.
I've been there. It sucks.
It does suck. It does suck.
But again, it's an opportunity to make it better than it ever was, and you really kind of need to take that opportunity because that is what's going to get you right in the head about what has happened.
You might want to take the opportunity to also do the front outriggers if you're there. Why not reinforce those guys?
Well, there are none in the front.
Aren't there front?
That's called a front bumper.
Right, exactly.
I thought they had outriggers in the front also.
Well, there's outriggers all down the frame, but the very front of the frame is a bumper.
Oh, okay.
And in the rear, there is no bumper on a series truck. It's just the rear cross member. The body bolts to it, and that is it. A lot of people think, well, that's kind of like an integral bumper, but it's only sheet metal, so it really isn't a bumper.
Ah, okay.
Right. And even if you put bumperettes on it, you're just mounting them to this sheet metal. It really doesn't do much.
You're just pushing these in just like this anyway.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
Exactly. So, and then once I've repaired this, then it's on to disassembling my rover and swapping everything over.
Now, are you keeping the engine off of your truck, or are you going to use the one off the new chassis?
I'm going to use my engine because I've got a Daihatsu diesel in mine, so I'd rather keep the diesel.
Okay, and transmission-wise, you're just gonna move the whole power plant with the diesel and everything?
Yeah, at this point that's much easier, and since the engine is on the rolling chassis is in absolutely unknown condition, I'm considering the gearbox completely unknown as well. So
good choice. Is that the original gearbox in your truck?
Yes.
Okay. Given that it's a late Series 3, that's really one of the better Series 3 transmissions to have is the late ones anyway.
Nice.
They are more robust than the early Series 3s, and a lot of the Series guys over here don't have any exposure to those late Series 3 transmissions, and the early ones, were kind of a step backwards in strength from the old 2A transmissions, so a lot of guys just don't like the Series 3 transmissions. But the late Series 3 transmissions are actually quite nice, and I like them. They're just hard to get your hands on in this country.
Yep, and that's good to hear, because I had heard the complaints about the Series 3 transmissions, and this one is a 2A that I'm pulling the old one out of, so I'll at least have a spare 2A that I can rebuild or what have you, and swap in temporary, if I have to.
But the problem with that is that it's not just a matter of swapping the transmission, because you've got to change your clutch actuation, and then of course you got to learn how to double clutch, because you no longer were going to have synchros in first or second.
Exactly. Well,
you might be better off selling it.
I might be, but I will say that on the Series 3 I actually had clutch issues, and the last project I did was replacing all the clutch hydraulics on it because it had some unknown issues. I never quite tracked down exactly what the problem was, but I did actually have to double clutch it for a while there until it finally died. So
good skill to learn anyway.
Exactly.
So what's your estimated time of having this all done? Because we're going to keep track of this through the podcast. This is going to be an
ongoing thread, I think.
Exactly. This is definitely going to be ongoing. The plan is to have it drivable by fall.
All right.
Certainly before the snow falls.
Nice.
Oh, I've heard that before.
Exactly.
Good deal. Well, sorry to hear
I
about.
say it all the time.
Oh, no, I mean, that's the whole story, so.
It's a good introduction to your project, and we can follow it as we go through the episodes.
Absolutely.
Right.
We will continue to follow your story, Morgan, as hopefully you'll provide us with stories and entertain us with your progress.
Absolutely. And
Don't get
hopefully
hurt.
no more,
And don't get hurt.
Disasters. Exactly.
At least you're not hurt. That's good.
Yeah.
Yes.
And 2 words you need to learn. Wheel chocks.
Well, when you're trying to roll something down off the ramps, you
I
don't
use
necessarily.
wheel chocks as a third line of defense.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Because if it does fail and get loose, it can roll a little ways and it hits the chalk. At worst, if it pops over the chalk, at least it's lost a whole lot of speed and you can maybe grab it.
That's yeah. I should have done that.
But I mean, even if it's just an old 4x4, I plan I'm going to allow it to roll this much, and I put the chalk.
Nice.
Well,
That is a very good suggestion, and
Hopefully-
it would have saved me a lot of stress.
Maybe.
maybe. But
Some.
certainly you've learned from this experience, and maybe through the podcast we can enlighten others that may be in the same predicament and don't.
And now you have an X tree to make those wheel chocks out of, which is a fitting use for that tree.
Exactly.
And hopefully a stronger chassis, too.
Yes.
Well, that is the 3rd episode of the CentreSteer podcast. I want to thank my panelists, Morgan, Harold, and Mark, who unfortunately we lost them on Skype, for joining me this month. And hopefully, dear viewers, or listeners is the better term, you'll go ahead out to our website and provide us with any comments on this episode and maybe ideas and topics you'd like us to talk about, chat about. And also maybe provide us with comments on our evolving format of how you like it or don't like it. Thanks for listening to this month's CentreSteer podcast. Please take a moment to visit our website, CentreSteer.com, and provide some feedback. Hope you join us again for our next edition. The CentreSteer theme song, Sunset Rider by the Tritons, is available from Mivio's Music Alley. Check it out at music.mivio.com. Say something, Morgan.
What do you want me to say?
Good. Okay, that's good.
That's enough.
That's enough. That's good. Yes.
Go home.
Figured that would work. Okay. Signing off.